This jet could claw past 50,000 feet like an elevator and brush Mach 2 without breaking a sweat. But the name it earned wasn't Starfighter, it was Widowmaker. How does a record setter, a missile with a man in it, end up as the most controversial fighter of its era? This is the real reason the F-104 was supposed to be a legend. Then it started crashing, starting with the why. In 1950 to 1951, Korea changed pilot demands overnight. MiG-15s climbed faster, fought higher, and chose the moment. Crews didn't want bigger radars or extra rolls. They wanted altitude, speed, and a gun that hit. Kelly Johnson listened and built a blade, not a toolbox. A tiny razor wing, a tall T-tail clear of shock, one hungry engine down the spine, and the M61 Vulcan in the nose. Strip drag, pour in thrust, keep only what wins emerge. So what did the Air Force get? A Dart with landing gear. The F-104 stayed lean where rivals were swollen, clean where others were busy. With the J-79, it went supersonic in a climb and set time-to-height marks that shut rooms up. In thin air where most jets feel floaty, it stayed crisp. Roll snapped, burner felt bottomless, and the view was rocket sled simple. Needle nose, short wings, sky. If you could draw speed on graph paper, wouldn't it look like this? That shape came from punishment, not guesswork. Skunk Works hammered wings in tunnels, then strapped scale models to 5-inch rockets and filmed shock patterns. Fluttering hollows died. Buzzing sweeps got cut. The winner was a razor with almost flat camber. The tail went wide for bite and sat high to avoid dirty flow. Even the gear ate thousands of drop tower hits. Past the sound barrier waited heat. Stay fast long enough and the skin bakes. Lockheed was already thinking about that thermal thicket. Then the gun bit back. The M61's recoil and gas in a slim nose turned deadly in 1954. Tony Livier fired, smelled fuel, lost the engine near 40,000 feet, and dead-sticked a prototype 40 miles to the dry lake. The fix? Not the airplane, the gun install. When a single part nearly ends you, do you quit or correct it and keep climbing? 4 months later, Herman Fish Salmon took the next high-altitude gun run first burst. Perfect. Second, an icy blast in the cockpit, dust whipping around, controls going strange as the jet fell through 20,000 feet. He ejected. Wreckage told part of the story, but one detail came from Salmon himself during debrief. He remembered light under his boots. That meant the belly hatch had popped from vibration and gun gas. Engineers reworked vents, stiffened structure, and kept the Vulcan. If the whole point was, get a gun on target fast, were they really going to ditch the gun? So why did pilots still line up for it? Because when the F-104 behaved, it felt unreal. Captain Joe B. Jordan proved it, taking an F-104C to 103,395 feet and grabbing time-to-climb records on the way. From up there, the world shrinks. That wasn't hype. That was the design doing exactly what Johnson promised. Wouldn't you want to turn in that rocket seat? But the same traits that made it shine in one sky became liabilities in another. The Air Force wanted a roomy, multi-role jet with big radars. The F-104 was a pure sprinter. Lockheed stretched the margins, air-to-air refueling, tip tanks, pylons, even a trapeze to drop a Genie nuclear rocket, and showed barrier landings and zero-length truck launches. Impressive, sure. Did it change the jet's nature? Not really. It lived best high, fast, focused. So the US moved on, NATO moved in. Production spread across Europe, trainers eased conversions, and 14 Air Forces flew starfighters with national gear and mixed roles. Could one airframe really fit all those jobs? Then came the name that stuck, Widowmaker, loudest in West Germany. Low, fast, all-weather strike at treetop height, young training pipelines, demanding maintenance, Brutal weather. Accidents piled up, over 200 losses. Other operators didn't see that pattern, but which speaks louder, averages or funerals? Was the jet unsafe or just unforgiving? No airframe with a razor wing and that much thrust will baby you. Calling it inherently unsafe skips the details. The F-104 demanded discipline. Fly the approach a little fast, keep some power in, flare exactly by the book, and it touched down fine. Get slow, improvise in the flare, and it quit flying, fast. Now add low clouds, rain, tight timelines, and pilots rushed through conversions. Thin margins turn into traps. So the community adapted. Ejection seats were upgraded. Instrument training got stricter. Weather limits tightened. Maintenance became standardized. But by then, the nickname had stuck. Fair or just memorable? How did this thing leave the sketchpad so quickly? Lockheed built a full wooden mock-up. Then, 1 year after the March 1953 contract, rolled out a real prototype. That pace is wild. Early engines, the Wright J-65s, couldn't unlock the airframe, so the jet lived near Mach 1.3 until the J-79 showed up. Even so, the Air Force ordered 15 F-104s on faith in the concept. Meanwhile, engineers were punishing hardware non-stop. Full airframe vibration mapping to avoid nasty resonance. Landing gear dropped thousands of times until it behaved, and escape geometry that forced downward-firing seats because an upward shot might send a pilot straight into that tall T-tail. Elegant? Not really. Honest? Completely. What would you trade for speed, polish, or proof? Why did the contracting approach matter? Because it changed who carried the risk. The F-104 was an early fix, then fly program. Instead of fielding jets and ironing out problems later, the Air Force pushed more responsibility back to Lockheed up front. That's common now. It wasn't then. It meant fewer, "we'll patch it after delivery" notes and more, "this already works" on day one. You can feel that pressure everywhere. The gun integration grind, the brutal inlet tests, the landing gear abuse, the rocket-mounted wing trials. If you had to prove everything early, where would you overtest first? So how did it actually fight? Not like the posters in Vietnam, USAF Starfighters flew high cover, escorted B-52s, and made precise tactical strikes. They weren't spending all day at treetop with dumb bombs. That wasn't the smart play. When the threat picture turned ugly with SAM belts and heavy artillery, you didn't shove a slick, non-stealth jet over a dense city. You managed altitude and timing, picked lanes, used standoff. The F-104 did the jobs in front of it, then the Phantom took most of the spotlight. Is that a flaw in the airplane? Or proof that tactics and timing decide who gets the headline? Let's get into the MiG debate, because this is where comment sections melt down fast. The MiG-17 that showed up later made a totally different bet. Short legs, brutal initial climb, and tight handling down low. Think alley knife fight, not open field sprint. The F-104 wanted the opposite. Vertical, fast, and over quickly. No, it didn't carry the big radar brains that came later. But if you set the fight on its terms, high and hot, how do you wrestle a missile with a man in it before it tags you and is gone? Now the wing, the soul of the jet. From root to tip, it's measured in single-digit inches of thickness. That isn't thin for a wing. That's a blade. Boundary layer control bled air over surfaces to make lift where there wasn't enough area. So this rocket-shaped thing could actually use normal runways. Those knife-edge leading edges didn't try to soften supersonic shock, they took it straight on. Why trust a shape like that? Because Skunk Works proved it the hard way. Strap scale models to 5-inch rockets, light the fuse, and film the shock waves from behind. If a wing fluttered itself to confetti, better the model than a full-scale jet at 700 knots. Want a wing you can count on? break the bad ones in the desert first. Landing gear never gets love, but it's where fast meets not fragile. The F-104's gear was compact to save weight, great in the air, picky on touchdown. So engineers abused it in a drop tower again and again, way harder than any pilot should ever land. Springs, dampers, trunnions, fail in the lab so they don't fail on the ramp. That same toughness showed up later when Lockheed demoed crash barrier engagements for European buyers. Was that daily ops? No. Was it proof the airframe could take a hard stop when it mattered? Absolutely. If you're betting your life on aluminum and steel, don't you want to see it suffer first? Let's talk about the Vulcan's logic, because this is where old ideas get retired. The classic fix for more firepower was add more guns. The M61 said, make one gun act like six. Clamp 6 barrels together so they brace each other. Spin them with an electric drive so you're not at the mercy of hot, dirty gas, and send recoil straight down the center line so you're not yanking the nose off target. Each round gets a fresh chamber, so fouling has fewer places to hide. On paper, that's elegant. In the nose of an F-104 at Mach, it's violent, until you vent the gun gas properly and stiffen the mounts. Then it turns into what crews called it, a laser hose. If you could choose between scatter and a straight cut, which would you take? Here's the thing most people miss. The jet that almost had no wing became the parent to two aircraft that were mostly wing and mostly engine. After the 104, Skunk Works went long and light with the U-2, a glider on steroids that lived in the stratosphere. Then they went dark and blistering with the SR-71, where the skin ran hot and the fuel did the cooling, and fast needed new units. Line all three up and the family resemblance is obvious. Clean lines, no fluff, purpose first. One design argued speed solves problems. Another argued altitude solves different ones. The last said, do both. If one shop can make three opposite answers feel related, doesn't that tell you something about the original idea? Europe changed the money story, and the learning curve work share turned buyers into builders. Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and others cut parts, assembled jets, and built industry along with airframes. Flight trials favored the 104 over serious rivals like the Lightning. But the real sale was a package: fast interceptor, training pipeline, and local jobs. The catch? Hundreds of pilots had to master a demanding jet quickly, often in rough weather. The Luftwaffe's early accident record wasn't destiny, but with that mission set and rollout pace, trouble was likely until fixes arrived. Would any fighter thrive if you scale it that hard, that fast, with that much pressure? So training adapted because it had to. The first downward-firing seat solved a tail clearance problem but limited options. Later ejection seats restored up and out with better geometry. Approach profiles got standardized and enforced. Sim time grew. Instructors taught speed discipline like it was oxygen. The airplane didn't turn easy. The community got sharper around it. There's a quieter legacy to the F-104 that most people miss. It changed how engineers test. Not just make it stronger, but try the weird thing and learn faster. Seeing a Starfighter nose grafted onto a DC-3 looks like a prank, until you realize it let teams prove new avionics without burning precious jet hours. Watching wings bolted to 5-inch rockets streak over the desert looks reckless, until you realize it gave real supersonic data with zero pilot risk. In the 50s, those methods looked eccentric. Today, they're standard. So why did the US Air Force step away so quickly? The future went big nose. Radars grew, guidance computers grew. All weather started to mean a small server room up front, and a thin fuselage ran out of space. The F-104 could hustle, take tip tanks, refuel in the air, carry missiles, but volume wins when sensors and missions keep expanding. It did fly combat in Southeast Asia, but the Phantom and newer designs took the jobs the 104 wasn't shaped to keep. If the game changes to carry more brains, what happens to a pure sprinter? Did Lockheed try to stretch it? They did. A later Lancer concept pitched longer wings and more agility, a spiritual sequel aimed at the same world that chose the F-15. It never left paper, but the idea stayed the same. A light, fast fighter can punch above its weight if you use it for what it's for. Could a well-flown 104 threaten newer jets in a steep vertical fight? Some test pilots swore it could, in a very specific envelope. Would you take that bet if the rules stay narrow? We should talk about maintenance and rhythm, because crashes are rarely just pilot versus airplane. They're also fleet versus process. High-performance jets need clean procedures. In Europe, squadrons grew fast while shops and supply chains were still catching up. A demanding airframe plus a young logistics system equals risk. As nations standardized inspections, mapped fatigue hotspots, stocked spares, and matured tech manuals, mishaps fell. But headlines stick faster than fixes. Once the nickname lands, how do you shake it? Quick gut check before we land this. The F-104 still looks like tomorrow, stand next to one. From the edge, the wing vanishes. The T-tail floats above you like a street sign. Touch the leading edge, carefully, and you understand why pilots called it a blade. For all the grief, it's hard not to admire the audacity. A fighter drawn to be exactly one thing, built at speed, tested with rocket cameras and drop towers, then pushed to the limit of reflexes and materials. Isn't there something honest about that? So why did it start crashing? Because the mission outran the airframe. A jet tuned for high, fast, clear air intercepts got yanked into low, fast, all-weather strike in a country that's basically a cloud factory, while training and maintenance sprinted to keep pace. When things go wrong at low level, the 104 gives you less float, less lift, less margin. Add human factors, conversion pressure, marginal weather calls, confidence from surviving a dozen tough sorties, and the recipe for headlines writes itself. If you take a scalpel and ask it to be a sledgehammer, who's really at fault? What's the fair verdict? The F-104 didn't fail at being a starfighter. It failed when it was asked to be everything else. Bomber, mud runner, sensor truck, bad weather commuter. In its own lane, point defense, high altitude dash, short lethal windows, it was excellent. Engineers fixed what could be fixed, from gun gas to egress. Tactics and training patched more. But the silhouette never lied. It was always a thoroughbred. Should a thoroughbred be judged on plowing a field? Here's the bottom line. The Starfighter proves two truths modern programs still wrestle with. Purity works if you keep the mission pure. Second, nothing stays pure for long. Requirements creep. Threats evolve. Air forces change their minds. When that happens, light, narrow designs run out of room before they run out of thrust. Does that make them mistakes, or time capsules from the moment they were perfect? Can a missile with a man in it be both a legend and a warning? Yes. The legend is how far a focused design can go when you refuse to compromise the core. The warning is how harsh that focus looks when you twist it into a role it wasn't built to carry. Respect both, and you understand the Starfighter beyond the nickname. If clear, no-nonsense breakdowns like this help you, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next deep dive.